Welcome to the Agent of Wealth podcast with Marc Bautis from Bautis Financial. In this podcast, Marc helps guide you towards financial freedom, ensure you never run out of money, and create a balance in life that prioritizes what is most important to you. Join us for this journey as Marc draws from years of expertise and guest experts to solve the multiple wealth building challenges involved in your financial life.
Welcome back to the Agent of Wealth. This is your host, Marc Bautis. Today I'm joined by a special guest, Pat Hankin. Pat is a business professional, parenting expert, and author of the Field Guide for Single Parents, a practical, fact-based resource designed to help solo parents navigate everyday challenges with clarity and confidence. Drawing from her own experience as well as insights from an online parenting community of more than 470,000 members, Pat brings a refreshingly honest, no-fluff approach to topics like money, time management, and building support systems. With a background in finance and systems thinking, she offers actionable strategies that empower single parents to take control of their lives and make smarter decisions for themselves and their families. Pat, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Marc.
Same here. I'm looking forward to today's conversation. What inspired you to write your book, The Field Guide for Single Parents? I'm curious about your background, the origin of the book, and if you could touch a little bit about who you had in mind when writing the book.
Yeah, thank you. So my background is in business. I actually started as a banker way back when and moved into management consulting, which is a fancy way of saying I help companies solve problems. I traveled around the world and then, one day I'm having a child and it looked like I was going to end up doing this by myself and I couldn't travel anymore. So I rolled out to my own consulting firm. And who I dealt with were other financial companies that wanted my expertise for having done this. And so I was able to get a more contained job. A job that requires you to travel as a single parent is pretty much a no-go. To fast forward, I rolled that into a company that was at the vanguard of these private online market research communities where companies would come in and you'd feel like focus groups on steroids. My portion of that business was I handled the major financial companies in the United States, so Schwab, the Hartford, Bank of America, Citibank. You could handle all my old clients, my new clients. And this was a way that they could come on this community and field questions about everything from the language they use, which we all know is kind of obtuse in financial services, to different products, to what people's needs were, to really be able to address the customers that they were looking to attract. It takes a certain amount of skill, and it was a learned skill, it was pretty new at the time, to moderate one of these communities and keep the conversation going. You're looking for people to be authentic, who really want to come in and help each other, as well as help the company that they're in this focus group for. During the pandemic, I wound out of that and started working for small businesses, Main Street now at this point versus Wall Street, and was helping them get financing through the pandemic, which, if anybody can remember, that was pretty chaotic for these companies. And like many people, life really slowed down for me, and I'm a high energy person, and my daughter was off at university. And I started poking around online to see what single parent discussions were out there. And now on the other side of it, I'm interested to see how people are approaching it. I have more time to research. And I found this community of 470,000 single parents that were in a public community. That's huge. And so I emailed the moderators and I said, could you use some help? I'm actually a professional at doing this. I never heard back. So I just did it anyway. Which many of us, why wait for permission, right? And what struck me in that community were two things. One is the authenticity of the people who were responding, who were posting, who were answering each other. It was not a giant rant session. These were people who sincerely wanted information about this single parenting job. the other thing was, after a while, I started actually contributing to the discussions. And because I had the experience, now having raised my daughter, and because of my background in finance, I was able to help people out. The feedback I got, Mark, was astounding. It was so positive. It was so overwhelming. People just did not know this information existed, or they didn't know how to get it. And someone asked, how do I find out about being a single parent? Where do I read about this? And like a good researcher, I went to look, and there were no books. There was a lot of memoirs, there was a lot of celebrity things, but not really kind of blocking and tackling and handling the challenges that come with being a single parent. So I wrote the book using these voices.
Yeah, it's a topic. I mean, I've come across tons of finance books. They all come at a lot of different angles. Some are really general, some are really specific, and you don't see too many out there at, how to approach it from being a single parent.
No, I think it's a topic that people might make them uncomfortable. They don't understand the scope of this market. It's 1 in 5, 1 in 4 households, depending on how you count it. 19 million households are headed by single parents, and I think that is it could easily be double that if you change the methodology that the census uses. What I did was take the main themes that I heard in this community that people were asking and put them into this book around money, time, health, relationships, recreation. I don't hear enough about that. And brought in a very well-known family therapist here in Boston and had her come in for some credibility around the more psychological aspects of this. So it really is a well-rounded book meant for to be usable to 19 million people. Generally, the age is 25 to 45, and it is agnostic as to how someone became a single parent. It just recognizes that you have different challenges than people who are partnered.
You mentioned time, and I think that, you even mentioned that earlier with traveling and your job. How does the aspect of time fit into, what a single parent goes through? And my guess is that because there's a challenge with time, one of the things that falls through the cracks or gets neglected is finances.
Yeah, exactly. It also is, if you weren't the person handling your finances before, if you were in a partnership, this becomes a very emotional issue and feels insurmountable. Do you have the time to figure this out? So you're right. They both have something in common in how to start, which is to take a deep breath, slow down, and figure out where you're spending your money now and where you're spending your time now. And then we talk you through different aspects of making that trade-off of whether you spend money or spend time. And one of the things I do, and I've heard it gives people a lot of relief, is we give them this template where you can estimate what really is the value of your time if you work, or even if you don't work outside the home. What are you making for, per hour once you deduct all the costs of working and the time that you take to get to work there afterwards, childcare. And if you can hire out jobs that are less than what you make on an hourly basis with that calculation, you should be hiring it out. You shouldn't feel guilty about hiring someone to cut your grass, send out your laundry, picking up the occasional takeout. Those kind of things are sanity saving, and that's what we're talking about, where we can find you time and it makes financial sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about some systems that maybe are unique to a single parent versus that one they don't even think about, or that a co-parenting wouldn't have to implement?
So systems, in the case of a single parent, are going to rely on more people involved in your life than someone who might have an automatic partner built in, or even sometimes a co-parent who's very reliable. That you're going to be relying on everyone from the fellow who might come shovel your snow out of here, because we've had a lot, it's head of my mind this year, to the people who are fixing your car, and the nurses line at your doctor's office. And being able to bring those people into your life in a positive way builds you a bigger support system. And if you accept that you can build a composite partner using all these people, brings you into a system that you can say, okay, now I know that I can get help. I was going to use these people anyway in my life, but now I recognize really how critical they are. And I can start to build routines that they're included in. Did I answer your question there?
Yeah, and what's the approach for actually implementing that? Do you kind of just document and brainstorm, these are all the things I'm doing, and these are maybe things I can, you mentioned like delegating to or paying for that service, or bringing someone in to help me with whatever that.
Exactly. We have an expression in business is you can't manage what you don't measure. So you might want to sit down and write out your task. There's a card game that I've seen on Amazon. I have no affiliation with this at all. It's called Fair Play. And what it is a set of about 300 cards that are pre-populated with about all the tasks that are around parenting in general. And the idea is you sit down with your family and you divvy the cards out and you see, how the work is balanced. I like to explain it to people. All right, now take all those cards, smush them together in one deck, and that's a single parent's job. It's a great visual image, and people usually sort of back up and they stop. And I think it's for the first time this starts to realize what it's like for people to do that. So you could do the same thing with those cards, and you could say, I could financially afford to outsource this. I can get help with this. You can add your own cars. Mine was, I needed a fast getaway from work if I drove to work. Right? You get the inevitable call. Somebody's sick. You have to go. In Boston, we have a little parking space. They stack your cars. It might take a half hour to get your car unburied when you leave at the middle or the end of the day. But I would always tip the parking lot attendant for a few bucks. My car was always front and center. Talk about the stress that kind of relieves. Being able, there's a whole lot of tips in the book about being able to bring people on into your tribe, right? And having them work. But it helps to start with writing down what you've done that day, who's helped you, who could help you. The issue about time with single parents, and I'm not saying it's only to them, but we walk around carrying our whole life in our heads, right? We're thinking we have to do it all ourselves because there's not someone else there. And that lends to this feeling of being overwhelmed. The system design would have you write it down, track yourself, live your life, track it for a while, either financially or time-wise, and then figure out how you're going to afford it financially or time-wise. We give you some ideas on how to find time when you don't have any.
You mentioned it earlier, that there's a lot of time there's a challenge of, if you weren't the one who was dealing with the finances of it. Are there specific challenges to that person, but also it's probably different for the one that was dealing with the finances too? Are there any different approaches for either one, or are they basically both should approach it from the same aspect of being a single parent?
I think it's going to require better collaboration skills for most people, right? Because you could just shrug it off and say, well, he does this, she does that, she does this, she does that, whatever the family structure is. And now you've got pretty much both of them, or at least a level understanding of what should be involved. It is really important to tell yourself that you're going to be okay here. you can figure this out. I interviewed a lot of very wealthy people for some of my clients, so we could understand what they were like. And I remember one woman, I called her Lisa in the book, that I interviewed, whose idea of money management was if it was in her checking account, she spent it.
I see a lot of people like that.
And no judgment here. I mean, it's the way their marriage worked. And then, he goes off, he finds someone else. He's got some pretty complicated investments, and she's got to learn how to manage her money. And, for better or for worse, in Massachusetts, the Commonwealth here, you're required to fill out what are called purple sheets when you're going to get divorced. I'm not sure if you have the same thing in New Jersey. And these are basically where you go out and you delineate all your expenses. And usually that's an eye-opener. I think for a wealth manager, you probably start that same process for someone starting out anyway, right? Knowing what you have, being able to manage something that you've measured. And the wealth manager in this case said to her, live your life and then we'll figure out how to afford it. Now, not all of us have got the kind of money that Lisa had, right? But I think the same sentiment should be in your mind from either side of one of these marriage split-ups or relationship split-up, is live the life and then we'll figure out how we can afford it. And I think when you understand that you're going to own part of this, it starts to make you either feel overwhelmed or sad. You think you can't do it. You can't just spend everything in the checking account anymore. But you then know that you've got agency over this. And that's the big thing. The other thing that I see is people are very unprepared for what the cost of splitting up is. I mean, you can tell some stories yourself, I'm sure. They're sure there's secret money over there that's being hidden, but the fact is most people spend up to their income. Even the money's all spoken for before they split up. Now you've taken that pile of money and you put it between two households. So that's where the challenge comes in, is that change in mindset.
Yeah. So some of the challenges I see as a challenge, the simple fact that it's, when usually someone splits, it's not that you can half the expenses get cut in half. It's going to be higher than half, and they have to figure it out. So not only were maybe they or maybe not, they figured out how to make this manage with both their incomes and the expenses. Now they're going to have to figure out how to, you're basically telling them you might have to spend less than, or you might have, you might not have all to live your lifestyle. Your lifestyle may have to change on what it was. And I think the other challenge too is that, example you give of the person who spends everything that's in their checkbook. A lot of times the other spouse was keeping them in check, kind of how their spending was. Now they either have to, like you said, they have agency over it, and maybe a forced agency where they're going to have to deal with it, and they didn't have to deal with that, kind of constrictor or constriction on their side. So yeah, I can see there's definitely a lot of challenges in going to a single, parenting model. And
as an advisor, either, I've met coaches, money coaches, I've met wealth advisors. I think the recognition that this is a loss for people, it's a good way to start. Because it's a loss of a life they thought they had, but what are they gaining? Hopefully less conflict around the topic. And I think it does take a while to, I was laid off once during one of the big recessions, the time when all the banks merged. And I was out of work for probably close to 2 years. Here's a person who had raised herself, put herself through college, I really knew. It was a huge shock to be able to start reducing, my $2,000 a week for child care, while I worked this long job, to maybe I can afford a college student come after school. So I can relate to that. It's there. It takes time. It won't happen overnight.
Yeah, definitely challenging. Have you seen tools that can help with this, or are you suggesting kind of like a manual approach to get someone getting their hands around everything?
Yeah, there are plenty of tools out there. I'm all analog because it's the way I learn, right? I'm a kinesthetic learner. I learn by writing. Other people are more visual. If you have a bank, I'd start with their tools. I spent a lot of time working with Schwab, Bank of America, a lot of these companies working on building those tools that can help you do it. And they're free. I hear Fidelity's got a good one. And you'll walk through what a budget is. And it's not a limitation on your personal freedom. Really. So we're dealing with the mindset here. This is allowing you to have power, where you have control and you have agency. And you may even get to the point where I got to, where I really loved engaging with my own money, as opposed to some other clients. So I like a challenge. I like figuring it out. I've got the challenge of teaching my daughter, who's now a scientist, and she'd rather be cloning things and thinking about this, but it does have a bright future for you. The challenge, of course, is to keep the emotion out of it, and money emotion. As far as tracking things in terms of time and money and effort and feelings, I like this thing called the bullet journal, and it basically is just a blank dot matrix notebook that you carry around. And the fellow who designed it, I think he designed it in college. It just feels right to me. The pages feel right. Like I said, I'm very sensitive to touch. I sat down. Somebody gave it to me, and 3 years after they gave it to me, I'm like, another system to learn, right? And I sat down during the pandemic, and it was 5 minutes to learn this thing. Really, there's some people who like duel them up, and I'm not artistic, but I'm just keep track of my life, and by putting your life down on paper, you can not carry it with you all day long.
Yeah, that makes sense. If there's one piece of advice or mindset shift you'd want every single parent listening today to walk away with, what would it be?
You should know how good you are. And I'm actually on a mission with employers about this, that having a single parent employee is an asset. Your skills are ingenuity, creativity, productivity, collaboration. If you don't know that, your toddler will teach you soon enough. These are skills that most employers would give their eye teeth for, because you can't go pick up a book and learn those. You learn those by coming in at each end. You need to abandon perfection. Nobody's perfect. Good enough is good enough in this case. And we give you all sorts of ways to do that, and some downloads and tricks. And I hope that the last chapter of the book's about recreation. Nobody writes about having fun as a single parent. I can tell you, my daughter and I had a blast. We had no money, and we traveled to 50 states. And a lot cheaper than going to Disney and to Paris. And it actually made more of an impact on her. And she's a pretty good traveler on her own now. So you don't have time to be a helicopter parent when you're a single parent. And your kids will be the better for it anyway. Feel good about it. You are more than enough. And you got a lot of company out there.
Yeah. All right, Pat, that's all the questions I have for you today. I want to thank you for joining me. I appreciate you sharing your experiences and expertise. Before we go, where can listeners get a copy of your book or get in touch with you to continue the conversation?
Oh, surely. My website is pathankin.com, pathankin.com. The book is available there are links there to Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, any of the major retailers have it. I also encourage people to go to their library and order it. It's in 10% of the libraries at this point, and it hasn't been out that long. So, if you read it, if you like it, then go buy it. But it's meant for you to be written in, for you to use, and more than anything, it's meant to be by your bedside table as a companion to help you through this journey. And I wish everybody luck.
Great. We'll include all that information in the resources section of the show notes. Thanks again, Pat, and thank you to everyone who tuned in today.
Don't forget to follow the Agent of Wealth on the platform you listen from and leave us a review of the show. We're currently accepting new clients, and if you'd like to schedule a one-on-one consultation with our advisors, please do so at bautisfinancial.com/call.
Thank you for listening to the Agent of Wealth podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Bautis Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional financial planning and investment advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investments and financial planning.